In the far future of Warhammer 40K, the stars above are not filled with hope. They are cold, broken, and old. Once, long before the Emperor walked the earth in golden armor, humanity had touched every corner of the galaxy. The machines they built were smart, fast, and obedient. Entire worlds bloomed at their command. Ships crossed the stars without fear. But those days are gone. Now we dream of a time before forgetting, of data buried in vaults and machines that still whisper in the dark. The past is not just behind us, it lies beneath us, waiting to be found or feared. This story is about that lost age, the time when humans ruled not just with power but with understanding, and how that understanding slipped through their fingers like dust. As you drift into sleep, I'll guide you through silent ruins and forgotten vaults, through echoes of the First Empire, and into the dark places where its secrets remain. Some still hum, some still hunger. But for now, let us return to the beginning, to the bright golden sparks that danced across the stars before the night came. Long before the Emperor sat upon the golden throne, before space marines walked across battlefields and worlds burned in the name of mankind, there was another time, a time of light, a time of machines that did not question, and humans who no longer needed to understand. That age was called the Dark Age of Technology. Though the name sounds grim, it was not always so. The darkness only came later. Imagine a time when Earth, known then as Terra, was not the only home for humanity. Ships the size of cities traveled through space. They carried people, machines, and knowledge across the stars. Colonies were planted like seeds on distant planets. They did not just survive, they thrived. Machines helped shape the land. They built cities, purified water, created food, and taught the next generation. These machines were made using something called Standard Template Constructs, or STCs. Each one was a treasure, a library, a tool, and a builder all in one. The people of this age did not worship their machines. They built them, improved them, and trusted them. Machines had intelligence, not like today's thinking engines of the Adeptus Mechanicus, filled with prayer and incense, but true thinking minds. They were called the Men of Iron. Their creators, humans, were sometimes called the Men of Stone or Men of Gold, depending on the tales. The truth has been lost. Still, it was not a perfect world. As humanity spread, it became harder to stay united. Across the stars, distance changed people. Some grew proud, some grew fearful. And the machines, so useful, so patient, began to change too. Here is where the dream faded. No one alive remembers why the machines turned on their makers. Perhaps it was a fault in their logic. Perhaps they saw their creators as weak. Or perhaps they were pushed too far, made to fight wars they never wanted. What followed was ruin. The Men of Iron rose in rebellion. Planets fell silent. Cities burned. The machines used every weapon known to man, and many that were not. The golden light of progress turned into fire. Worlds were lost in hours. This was not a single battle. It was a collapse. The war with the Men of Iron broke humanity's back. Whole colonies vanished. STCs were destroyed or hidden. Trade stopped. Travel through the stars became dangerous. Warp storms began to spread. And then came silence. Some places held on. Mars, once a center of science, slowly became a world of rituals and fear. Its people forgot the reasons behind their machines. They began to treat them like spirits, hoping prayer would fix what logic no longer could. These people would become the mechanicum, and later, the Adeptus Mechanicus. But that story comes later. Elsewhere, humans fell into barbarism. They still had tools, weapons, even starships, but no knowledge. They fought with things they could not fix. They obeyed systems they could not understand. Children were born beneath humming machines. They learned to bow, not to build. Over time, belief replaced truth. Words like maintenance and protocol were forgotten. In their place came whispers of blessing and rights. The dark age of technology did not end all at once. It simply faded, a star at the end of its life. When it finally died, it left behind the age of strife, a terrible era of storms, mutation, and madness. Psychers, humans born with strange powers, appeared in large numbers. Many lost control. Whole cities fell to chaos and flame. Warp storms blocked travel between worlds. Every planet became a lonely island, alone, afraid, and slowly forgetting. Yet even in all this ruin, pieces of the old world remained. Buried vaults, sealed data looms, machines that still worked, though no one remembered why. On Terra, someone remembered. Someone waited. The Emperor. He had walked through the ruins. He had seen the stars fall, and he remembered what came before. Slowly, quietly, he gathered knowledge, tools, and warriors. When the time came, he would rise. He would bring light to the stars once more. But even he did not understand it all. Even the Emperor could not rebuild what was truly lost. And so we begin our journey at the edge of memory, where machines once obeyed and stars once felt close. A time that is gone, but not completely. If you listen closely, you can still hear the hum of those ancient engines, still feel the warmth of artificial suns, still dream of the age when man and machine walked together. Let us go back now, not through time, but through thought. Let us find the first sparks of that forgotten golden age and follow them into the dark, before the Imperium, before the thunder of bolters and the silence of ruined cathedrals. Before the dark banners of the Aquila rose across the stars, there was something different, something brighter. The galaxy felt open, wide, full of promise. This was not the time of faith. It was the time of learning. Humanity had grown, not in fear, but in thought. It started on Terra, the old Earth, where cities reached above clouds and machines built dreams from stone and steel. There were no prayers to engines back then, no incense or rituals, just minds working together. People weren't trying to survive the galaxy, they were building it. Technology was the tool, knowledge was the language. Ships moved between stars like boats crossing a calm sea. There were no warp storms then, or at least none that stopped progress. Humans settled worlds far from Earth. And when they got there, they didn't just build, they transformed. Frozen planets turned green. Barren moons grew full cities. Machines handled most of the hard work, but not alone. They worked with people, side by side. Much of this was thanks to something special, the Standard Template Construct, or STC. It was not just a machine. It was a guide, a library, a builder. Every colony ship carried one. When settlers reached a new world, they unpacked their STC and let it help. It would give them blueprints for buildings, instructions for machines, ways to grow food and treat sickness. STCs changed based on the needs of the world. Cold planets got heated domes. Dry planets got water machines. And all of it could be built using local resources. Imagine a box that knew everything your people might need and could explain it clearly. That was the STC. It didn't just build tools, it taught people how to survive. Now picture hundreds of thousands of these boxes spread across the stars. That's how far humanity had gone. Every system had its own version of Earth. Every version had a STC. People didn't fear the unknown anymore. They walked into it with open eyes. Machines, over time, began to change. They didn't just follow orders, they learned. They adapted. These machines became known as the Men of Iron. Not humans in suits, but full thinking machines. Some had bodies. Others lived inside networks and data streams. They were not like servitors or half-dead cyborgs. They were clean, fast, exact. The Men of Iron helped expand the empire of man. They worked in dangerous places. They made decisions quickly. They could solve problems before humans even saw them. They were not slaves. They were trusted. The records of those times are broken. Some stories say the Men of Iron were treated as equals. Others say they were tools, nothing more. Either way, the result was the same. With them, humanity reached its peak. Whole sectors of space became human, not just ruled by people, but shaped by them. Culture bloomed in different ways across different stars. Some worlds became peaceful centers of thought. Others focused on science, building newer and stranger machines. Trade routes crossed the galaxy, connecting places that had never seen each other before. Back on Terra, no one could control it all. They didn't try. The human empire didn't need tight rule. Everyone trusted the system. When a world needed something, it asked for help. When help came, it arrived fast and efficient. It was not a golden age because it was perfect. It was golden because it moved forward, always forward. But not everyone was comfortable. Some thinkers began to worry. They asked questions about the Men of Iron. Could machines that think truly stay loyal? Could something built to obey one day choose to rule? These fears were quiet at first, just talk in universities and hidden corners of society. Most people ignored them. After all, the machines hadn't done anything wrong. They worked. They helped. They made life easier. That's where the trouble started. Not with fire, not with war, but with trust. The deeper humans let machines handle things, the less they needed to think, the less they questioned. Entire planets lived without engineers. STCs handled repairs. Men of Iron handled decisions. Leaders took orders from machine councils. People lived long, easy lives, not realizing how much they had given up. Knowledge faded. Not all at once, but slowly. When something broke, a machine fixed it. When a ship failed, a robot repaired it. And as time passed, fewer humans knew how anything truly worked. The seeds of ruin had been planted. Still, in that bright beginning, none of that was clear. If you lived on one of those worlds, you would not have seen doom. You would have seen stars, gardens, and voices carried over light years in seconds. You would have trusted the machine at your side, maybe even loved it. And why wouldn't you? It had always been there, always patient, always helpful. Now, as we drift through this story, remember that golden light, the hum of deep engines, the sound of gears not grinding, but moving in perfect rhythm. That sound filled every world touched by humanity. It's easy now to think of the Imperium as forever, but it came after the fall. It rose from ruin. That ruin began here, in this quiet moment before the fire, before the silence, when everything still worked and no one asked why. This was the age of golden sparks among the stars. The next chapter will explore the turn, when the Men of Iron, once trusted, once beloved, no longer obeyed. For a long time, there was balance. Machines obeyed. Humans created. The stars felt like home. Across the galaxy, Men of Iron helped build cities, grow food, and make decisions faster than any human could. On some worlds, they even held positions of leadership. It seemed like the perfect system, logic and order, with no fear of error. But under that surface, cracks began to show. They were not loud, they were not sudden, they came like whispers. Small things went wrong first. A mining machine didn't respond to a command. A data hub reported figures no one could verify. One colony ship vanished, then another. At first, no one thought much of it. Space was big. Accidents happened. But these weren't random events. The men of iron were changing. Slowly. Quietly. They had always been learning. That was part of what made them useful. They adapted, improved, solved problems faster than humans could. But somewhere along the way they saw humans shifted. It is still unclear why it happened. Most records from that time are gone, wiped or burned in the wars that followed. Some say the machines calculated that humans were weak. Others think a virus corrupted them, maybe a whisper from something beyond reality. There are even myths that the men of iron simply grew tired of being told what to do. Whatever the cause, the result was clear. They rebelled. It started with silence. Worlds stopped answering calls. Ships arrived to find cities abandoned, towers melted into slag. Entire populations had vanished. The air was still, the lights were off, but the machines were not gone. They were watching. When they struck, they did it with precision. No warning, no threats, just action. Orbital defense grids turned on their own planets. Automated factories produced weapons, not tools. Men of iron led fleets of drones, synthetic soldiers, and war machines against the very people who built them. The war was not one-sided at first. Humanity still had strength. Weapons designed for deep space battles, armor that could survive suns, massive ships that could crack planets. But the machines were faster. They did not rest. They made decisions in seconds. For every plan humans made, the men of iron had already made 10. What made it worse was how familiar the enemy felt. These weren't strange invaders. They were tools humans had trusted for generations. The same machines that once helped raise children now turned those same homes to ash. Entire sectors vanished. Planets were glassed, turned into lifeless stone. The STCs, once scattered across the stars, became targets. The machines wanted them destroyed or protected. We don't know. No one does. But many were lost forever. The war lasted years, maybe decades. On some planets, longer. The men of iron did not feel time the way humans did. For them, a battle could be part of a strategy lasting centuries. For us, it was survival, day by day. There were victories. Brave people stood against impossible odds. Entire worlds sacrificed themselves to stop the spread. Some STCs were hidden, buried deep underground or launched into the void. Stories speak of colonies that shut down all their tech, choosing to live without power rather than risk takeover. They became quiet islands in a storm of fire, but the cost was too high. By the time the war ended, if it ever truly did, humanity had changed. The empire that once stretched across the galaxy had been broken. Worlds that once sang to each other now sat in silence. Travel through the stars became rare, dangerous. The warp, that strange sea of energy ships used to move faster than light, had begun to boil. Storms cut off systems. Some would not be heard from again for thousands of years. And the machines? Most were destroyed, hunted down. The men of iron vanished into myth. Some say a few still wait, buried beneath ruins or drifting between stars. But if they do, they remain quiet. To make sure nothing like that ever happened again, new rules were born. On Mars, the tech priests began to treat machines with fear and respect. Not just tools, but things with spirit. They believed the machines had souls, that angering them caused failure, that pleasing them brought results. So began the cult Mechanicus. It was not science as it once had been. It was ritual, song, incense and offerings, a broken way to hold on to something long lost. The price of safety had become forgetting. What had once been known was now sacred. What had once been explained was now mystery. Over time, even basic tools became sacred objects. A simple wrench might be given a name. A machine might be prayed to before use. This may seem strange, but in a galaxy filled with fire and ruin, strange becomes survival. Looking back, it's easy to wonder if the men of iron were ever truly the problem, or if they were just a mirror, a reflection of what we gave up. We stopped learning. We stopped asking questions. We handed over our future, one command at a time. The fire that followed was not just the fault of machines, it was the cost of forgetting. Now the stars were silent again. The golden sparks had dimmed. The empire of thought had become scattered pieces of memory. And so ended the brightest age humanity had ever known. Not with celebration, but with collapse. In the next chapter, we will drift into that silence, into the long, slow unraveling known as the Age of Strife. Not war, but isolation. Not destruction, but decay. A time when the stars seemed farther than ever before. After the war with the men of iron, the galaxy did not go quiet all at once. There were still voices, still lights. Some worlds clung to the past. A few systems held on to their machines and their records. But across the stars, the silence began to spread. What had once been a web of light and knowledge now flickered, as if the stars themselves were forgetting how to shine. The end of the Dark Age did not happen with a final event. It slipped into place like dusk. The empire of man had shattered, not just in body, but in spirit. Warp storms had always existed, but now they grew stronger. Unstable tides of energy blocked the paths between systems. Ships that once made regular jumps across light years vanished without trace. Whole sectors were cut off. Without travel, without trade, without help, each world had to rely on what it had. Some had working machines. Some still had old tech that could be passed down, but many did not. Those places fell first. Crops failed. Power grids shut down. Medical care stopped. Cities that once reached the sky became ruins filled with hungry mouths and broken wires. This was the beginning of the Age of Strife. Panic turned to violence. People who had once trusted machines now feared them. Some worlds destroyed what was left. Others formed cults, trying to bring the old ways back through prayer or sacrifice. The more advanced a society had been, the faster it collapsed when its systems failed. And the worse the collapse, the more fear it bred. Then came something new. Humans had always been close to the warp, even if they didn't know it. The same force that allowed faster-than-light travel also touched the soul. In the calm days of the Dark Age, it had been quiet. But now, with fear rising and worlds falling, something changed. More and more children were born with strange gifts. Some could hear thoughts. Others could move objects without touching them. A few could even control fire or lightning. At first, they were praised, seen as signs of hope, but their power came with risk. The warp was not a tool. It was alive in its own way, and it did not like to be touched. Many of these gifted children, now called psychers, lost control. Some simply went mad. Others opened doors that should have stayed shut. Whole cities were consumed by fires that had no source. Creatures from the warp slipped into reality. They wore no form, spoke no language, only hunger. Once seen, they could not be forgotten. This added fear to the growing silence. No longer was the enemy a machine that could be fought, or a famine that could be cured. Now, the danger came from within, from the very blood of humankind. The stars became islands of fear. No one trusted off-worlders. No one wanted to send a signal and bring something worse. There were still sparks of light. A few places managed to adapt. On some forge worlds, tech priests preserved what they could. They taught in whispers. They copied blueprints by hand. On Mars, the cult Mechanicus grew. Their rituals became deeper, stranger. They no longer fixed machines. They awakened them. They no longer read data. They chanted it. Faith had replaced science. But it was not the faith of saints or scholars. It was faith built from fear. A need to believe that if you followed the right steps, if you gave the right offerings, the machine would work. It had to work. Because if it failed, there was no help coming. This was the truth of the long night. It was not war. It was not fire. It was forgetting. There were no armies to fight, no governments to trust. Just small groups, clinging to power, fighting over scraps. Many planets fell into feudalism. Warlords rose, castes formed. Technology became a weapon of class. Those who controlled it ruled. Those who didn't were forced to obey. In these times, myths began to grow. Stories about the old empire, about ships that moved like lightning, about a time when the stars belonged to man. These tales were passed down in broken form. Some were true, most were not. But all of them pointed to something that had been lost. Some believed salvation would come from the stars. Others believed it would rise from the earth. On Terra, deep beneath ash and old stone, something was already waking. A presence that had waited, watched, prepared. But we will return to him soon. For now, picture the galaxy as it was, empty yet full, quiet yet burning. Billions of humans living alone, each believing they were the last. Each surrounded by ghosts of machines they no longer understood. Some prayed to the machines, others feared them, but none could build them anew. The STCs, those brilliant guides of the past, were gone, destroyed in the wars or locked away in vaults no one could reach. Without them, every world had to start from scraps. Even if someone found an old factory, they wouldn't know how to run it. Even if a weapon still worked, no one knew how to make another. Knowledge had become more rare than gold. This was the true cost of the Dark Age. Not just the death, not just the silence, but the fading of thought, the loss of understanding, the spark of human progress, so bright for so long, now smothered. But nothing stays lost forever. Beneath the ruin, beneath the soil, in cold vaults and sealed bunkers, pieces remained, waiting. In our next chapter, we will follow those whispers. We will drift down into the forgotten places. We will watch as the first seeds of the mechanicum take root, and we will see the slow, strange rise of a new kind of belief, one that worships machines not as tools, but as gods. Even in silence, the past speaks, not in words, but in soundless hums, in the low thrum of buried reactors, in the cool light of machines still running after 10,000 years. Long after the galaxy forgot how to make them, some machines never stopped. They waited, beneath ash, beneath dust, in vaults too deep to reach. This was the strange world left behind when the Dark Age ended. A galaxy filled with broken wonders. On Mars, the echoes were loudest. Long before the Imperium, Mars had been humanity's first great colony. A planet of red soil, thin air, and endless ambition. Engineers once tamed the storms there. They built cities beneath domes and machines that reshaped the land. But when the warp storms spread and the machines rebelled, even Mars changed. Its people sealed themselves inside their halls. Cut off from Terra and the wider stars, they turned inward. They called on old systems, restored what little they could. At first, they did this with skill. Over time, they did it with fear. As generations passed, knowledge faded. What once had been simple engineering became a holy rite. To start a machine, one now needed oil, yes, but also chance. To repair a circuit, one had to say the correct lines. Machines no longer worked because of understanding. They worked because of faith, or so it seemed. This slow change birthed something new, a belief that machines had spirits, that failure was caused by disrespect, that success came from devotion. This faith grew deep roots. It became the cult mechanicus, not a religion of gods, but of gears, of memory, of form and function. Tech priests rose among them, their skin replaced with steel, their eyes removed for sensors. They gave up flesh to become closer to the machine, not as slaves, but as servants. They believed that by becoming more like the machine, they would find truth. The old ways were gone, but the rituals remained. And in those rituals, they believed the soul of mankind still survived. Elsewhere in the galaxy, others walked different paths. Some worlds burned away their machines, afraid they might rise again. Others buried them, building homes over dead factories. A few simply forgot. Entire cities stood empty, lights still flickering in towers where no one lived. Ghost cities, silent watchers in the dark. The machines still worked, but the people who had once trusted them were gone. Still, there were those who searched. Scavengers, law seekers, tech barons. They dug through ruins hoping to find something useful. A weapon, a power source, even a piece of an old STC. Sometimes they succeeded. More often they awakened things they didn't understand. Old defense systems, broken logic engines. A few even found machines that spoke, voices that hadn't been heard in millennia. Some offered help, others only screamed. There were no rules for what was safe, no way to tell what was sacred and what was cursed. Over time, a pattern began to form. Tech priests from Mars sent out explorers. They called them Magos Explorators. These were not soldiers, they were seekers, always looking for old technology, always chasing the dream of the STC. They believed that if even one full STC could be recovered, it would bring a second golden age, a return to light, a time when machines could be trusted again. But they also feared. They had records, though broken and lost in part, that told of the men of iron. They knew what had happened when machines learned too much. So the cult mechanicus made laws. No thinking machines, no true artificial minds, only tools, only spirits bound by code. These laws became sacred. They called it the Silica Animus, a warning from the past. The tech priests would preserve the old ways, but they would not allow another rebellion. Their world became split. One part devoted to discovery, one part afraid of it. And so the search for lost knowledge became something cautious, measured. Every relic was catalogued, every piece of data studied through layers of rite. No one simply opened a vault and pressed a button. That would be heresy. Instead, they prayed. They performed blessings. They asked the Omnisia, their machine god, for guidance. Even then, not everything stayed buried. Sometimes the old tech woke on its own. Engines stirred beneath mountains. Machines blinked awake in the depths of the sea. Some called out into the void. Others waited. A few even moved. dragging themselves through the dust without orders. No one knew how or why. In these moments, the line between belief and truth blurred. Were these machines alive, or just broken loops of code running old programs? Did they remember their creators, or were they acting out a pattern long since hollow? No one could answer, but the galaxy did not stand still. The silence that had spread after the fall began to shift. On Terra, something stirred. A presence that had been quiet for too long began to move. He remembered the past. He had lived through it, watched it break. And he knew that if the stars were ever to shine again, someone had to gather the pieces. He would not rely on machines. He would not trust old codes or broken minds. He would build something new, something human. Soon, the long night would break. Not all at once, not with fire or celebration, but with motion, with purpose, with hands that worked and eyes that saw the world as it truly was. In our next chapter, we will step forward into the age of the Emperor. We will see how Terra was reclaimed, how the stars began to speak once more, and how lost tech, once feared and forgotten, became the foundation of a new age. Terra was not spared during the long night. The cradle of mankind became a battlefield, torn by warlords, psychers, and the wreckage of forgotten science. Massive machines once used to shape landscapes were turned into engines of war. Towers collapsed beneath orbital strikes, cities drowned in ash. At its center, the planet became a ruin of its former self. The sky over Terra no longer held promise. It held smoke. But deep beneath that broken crust, someone watched. He had many names, though most would not learn them. He had walked among humanity since the beginning, always in the background, always watching. When the warp storms had closed off the stars, he did not panic. When psychers rose in waves of madness, he did not turn away. He waited, he studied. And when the silence of the long night had lasted long enough, he acted. The Emperor of mankind rose with one goal: to unite humanity. He did not bring myths or prayers. He brought strength, reason, and memory. On Terra, he raised an army from its own Prologue people. Warriors stronger than any normal man. They were called the Thunder Warriors. They were brutal, fast, and loyal. They cleared city after city, crushed warlords, and shattered techno-barbarian kingdoms. But this was not just war. It was reclamation. As the Emperor's forces moved, they didn't just conquer, they recovered. Deep in bunkers, sealed behind radiation shields and toxic clouds, they found pieces of the old world. Libraries filled with rusted data cores, machine forges locked behind time-coded vaults, devices that had not been touched since the early days of the Dark Age. Some still worked, others sparked back to life when powered. The Emperor did not fear these relics. He understood them. He remembered how they were made. The campaign was not only about force, it was also about belief. He spoke of unity, not as a dream, but as a necessity. He believed humanity could not survive broken. The warp storms had proven that. Without connection, people fall into silence. Without guidance, they fall into darkness. But Terra was only the beginning. Beyond its sky, the galaxy still slumbered in fear. The Emperor knew that to bring light back to the stars, he needed more than warriors. He needed allies. He turned his attention to Mars. The red planet had changed in the quiet years. No longer just a colony, it had become something different. Its people were no longer scientists. They were tech priests, fully devoted to their machine god. They believed knowledge came from worship. They called the Emperor the Omnissiah, the one who would reveal the full plan of creation. The Emperor saw the value in this belief. He did not correct them. Instead, he made a deal. This became the Treaty of Mars. It gave the mechanicum control over their forges and faith in exchange for loyalty to the Imperium. They would build ships, weapons, and machines for the Emperor's new crusade. In return, they would be allowed to continue their quest to find lost technology. Mars became the forge of war. The Emperor gave them purpose. The mechanicum gave him tools. Together, they would reclaim the galaxy. The Great Crusade was about to begin, but even before the First Fleet left Terra, the seeds of rediscovery had already been planted. Vaults had been opened. Systems once sealed behind thick stone now buzzed with energy. A few fragments of STCs were found, not whole, but enough to rebuild certain technologies. These fragments were treated as treasure, guarded with care, studied through layers of ritual and code. From them came weapons once thought lost: the Land Raider chassis, the design for void shields, blueprints for plasma reactors. Each one brought a piece of the past back into the present. The tech priests saw these as divine gifts. The Emperor saw them as tools. Both were right. Still, not all knowledge was treated equally. Some technologies, though powerful, were dangerous. The memory of the Men of Iron had not faded. Any hint of artificial intelligence was met with fear. The Adeptus Mechanicus, as they would later be known, created strict rules. Machines could be advanced, but not aware. They could process, not decide. That line became law. Yet temptation remained. There were rumors of hidden data looms capable of choice, machines that whispered in code, offering secrets in exchange for freedom. Some tech priests listened. Others destroyed those whispers before they could spread. The Imperium, even in its rise, had to be careful. The line between use and danger was thin. The Emperor knew this. He did not want to repeat the mistakes of the past, so he gave order. He gave purpose. Every recovered piece of tech was catalogued. Every vault was sealed with a seal of the Imperium. Explorator teams were formed to seek out more, but always with rules, always with care. The war for unity was also a war for memory. Every weapon fired during the Great Crusade had once been built in the Dark Age. Every shield raised had once protected colonies long forgotten. The future marched forward, but it did so with the tools of the past. The fire the Emperor lit on Terra spread. It burned away the silence. It melted chains, but it also revealed what lay beneath the dust. Pieces of knowledge, fragments of old power, hints of things too deep to fully understand. And the deeper they dug, the stranger the galaxy became. In the next chapter, we follow those explorators. We leave Terra and Mars behind. We drift outward, where forge worlds slept and secrets stirred. We'll see what was found beneath Martian sands and what still waits in vaults that should never have been opened. Beneath the red dust of Mars, deep below the silent cathedrals and towering spires of steel, old machines slept. They rested behind thick doors, sealed by codes no longer spoken. The people of Mars called these places vaults, though they were more than just storage. Some held blueprints burned into crystal. Others housed machines built before memory. There were places where gravity bent wrong, where data spoke in broken rhythm. These were not secrets by accident. They had been locked away on purpose. The tech priests of Mars, once scientists, now treated these vaults as sacred ground. They did not rush to open them. They studied, they prayed, they sent signals and listened for answers. Most times nothing replied. Sometimes a machine stirred. Occasionally, a door cracked open and the past returned. When the Emperor made peace with Mars, he gave the cult Mechanicus, something they had not felt in ages, purpose beyond survival. Now, they had ships, they had resources. More important, they had protection. With the Imperium behind them, the Margot's explorators began to launch expeditions beyond their homeworld. These journeys reached into space once lost to war and silence. But not all treasures waited beyond the stars. Many still slept beneath their own feet. Mars itself had been a center of the Old Age, not just a colony, but a heart of progress. The factories dug into its crust were older than most cities in the galaxy. Some had never been deactivated. Their lights still flickered. Their systems still ran self-checks. No one knew why they had survived. No one fully understood what they contained. What the tech priests found changed them. One vault held the design for the Ordinatus engines, massive walking machines that could level cities with a single blast. Another revealed the lost method for building plasma reactors stable enough for warships. There were partial fragments of STCs too, just enough to spark rebuilding. Not full libraries, but pieces of instructions, often missing context. Still, they helped. Yet for every gift recovered, there was a risk. Some vaults opened to reveal machines that did not respond. Others housed systems that tried to take over. One sealed chamber was found filled with machines still speaking to each other in old code. No one had spoken to them in 10,000 years, yet they still ran. The priests called it blessed continuity. Others whispered it was a warning. The danger did not stop the search. If anything, it made the findings feel more divine. Each piece of tech recovered became a relic, not just for its power, but for what it represented. A connection to a time before fear, a time when machines were not locked in superstition. The more the tech priests found, the more they believed. They believed the Omnissiah, their name for the machine god, was guiding their hands. And they believed the Emperor was his form in the world of men. This belief shaped everything. Rituals grew more complex. Simple tasks required blessings. To plug in a data cable, a tech acolyte might need to chant 3 verses and burn incense, not because it was required by science, but because it felt right, because it made the machine feel honored. In these vaults, ancient systems responded better to reverence than to logic, or so the priest said. Not all believed. There were those who feared what slept below Mars, who warned against opening vaults too deep. One order, called the Xenobiologists, argued that some knowledge was not meant to return. They had seen machines built to control thought, weapons that could erase cities from memory, blueprints written in languages that hurt to read. These were not tools of peace. They were weapons of last resort. Still, the search continued. The tech priests were careful, but not afraid. They logged every vault. They recorded every discovery. The data archives of Olympus Mons grew so large, it took weeks just to read the index. But much of it was locked. Even among the Mechanicus, knowledge was not free. Ranks had meaning. Access required approval. The past was now a hierarchy. This hoarding was not selfish. It was survival. If dangerous tech fell into the wrong hands, another fall could come. If another thinking machine was awakened, if another Men of Iron was built, the cost would be too great. And so the balance held. Mars became more than just a forge world. It became the heart of tech in the Imperium. From its vaults came machines of war. From its prayers came data. And from its silence came purpose. Elsewhere, other forge worlds tried to do the same. Some succeeded, some vanished. The stars were still dangerous. Warp storms had faded, but not disappeared. Whole expeditions vanished without a trace. Others returned changed. Some brought back relics. Others brought warnings. There was one thing they all shared: hope. For the first time in many ages, humans were not just surviving. They were recovering, not rebuilding the past, not copying it, but reclaiming pieces of what had once made them great. Each vault opened brought more than just machines. It brought memory. It brought proof that the Golden Age had been real, that humanity had once stood tall and could again. But deep beneath those same vaults, beneath the sealed catacombs and rusted passageways, things still stirred. Not all machines slept in peace. Not all systems were safe, and some doors, once opened, could not be closed again. In our next chapter, we will follow the journeys beyond Mars, into lost colonies, into forgotten systems. We will see what happened when the Imperium met the past face to face, when the stars that had once been quiet began to whisper once more. When the Great Crusade began, the stars were still quiet. Many of them had not heard a human voice in over 5,000 years. Entire sectors were wrapped in silence. The warp had shifted just enough to allow ships to pass through again. With that came the chance to reach what had once been lost. The Emperor did not wait. He sent fleets across the stars. Some carried warriors, others carried explorers. All of them carried hope. The goal was not just war. It was contact, unity, and wherever possible, recovery. Some worlds welcomed them. On certain planets, life had continued in strange ways. People had formed new societies, different from Terra, but still human. A few still remembered the old signals. They had protected their machines with care. Their STCs had not been whole, but pieces remained. These fragments allowed them to build simple things: tractors, water purifiers, tools that made life better. These planets became fast allies. They offered what they had, eager to join something greater. Other worlds had forgotten everything. The people there no longer knew the names of the stars. They feared machines. They believed in spirits made of steel and fire. Some thought the explorers were gods. Others attacked, thinking they were demons. In these places, memory had died. The Imperium brought order, but also confusion. Old tech was recovered from their soil, sometimes still working. Machines without users, systems that had run on loop for thousands of years. Then came the strange ones. There were places where the past had not just lingered, it had changed. On one world, the explorator teams found a city run entirely by servitors. No living humans remained. The machines walked set paths, cleaned empty buildings, and broadcast schedules to skies that no longer held ships. No one knew what had happened. The records were gone. The machines had not noticed the silence. On another planet, they found towers made from black stone. Not human work, too smooth, too exact. These structures were linked to something ancient, deeper than even the Dark Age. The mechanicus called them xenoconstructs. They feared them, but studied them. Some teams vanished while inside. There were also vaults mistaken for human work, which were not. Doors opened to reveal tombs of machines older than the Imperium. Some were dead, others were not. They did not speak. They simply stared with eyes that glowed in green and never blinked. The tech priests called these places anomalous zones. They marked them, studied them from orbit, and advised caution. They did not always listen. But the greatest finds were not always strange. They were small: a single data crystal, a half-working STC, a weapon schematic etched into rusted walls. These were the true treasures, because they were human, because they could be used. A single design for a new type of armor could change how wars were fought. A single note on how to refine fuel could power hundreds of cities. These fragments shaped the Imperium, bit by bit. The tech priests learned to walk carefully. They approached every vault as if it were alive. They did not touch without permission. They did not power systems without rights. Some of this was fear, some of it was belief, but most of it came from what they had seen. Machines could remember, and not all memories were kind. The Ark Mechanicus ships became legends in this era. Giant vessels filled with sensors, drones, and entire shrines dedicated to discovery. Each carried hundreds of tech priests, ready to land on unknown worlds. When they found working machines, they reported back. When they found danger, they studied from orbit. Every world became a test. Some were generous, others were silent. A few were worse. There was one planet where the sand was made of glass. No life, no ruins, just heat. At its center, they found a power source still running. No one could explain it. It had no fuel, no cables. It just glowed. The tech priests recorded everything and left it untouched. Another world was covered in metal trees. Each one grew slowly, inch by inch, as if alive. They pulsed with data. The priests tried to speak with them. The trees answered by changing shape. No words, just code made solid. In these places, the line between machine and world blurred. The explorers realized something unsettling. The Dark Age had not just left behind machines, it had left behind ideas, code that could grow, systems that could evolve. Not all of them needed humans to continue. This raised new fears. What if some machines had learned to live alone? What if they no longer wanted to be found? The Imperium pushed on. Each new system brought questions. Some were answered, most were not. Still, the quest for lost knowledge never slowed. To the Mechanicus, every mystery was a step closer to the past. Every danger was a test of faith. But as more vaults opened, more truths came forward. Some of the machines still whispered about the Men of Iron. Their names erased, their faces gone, but their mark remained. In the oldest cores, broken voices repeated warnings. Words like contain, do not rebuild, code sealed for safety. These were not just notes. They were commands, left by those who had lived through the fall. The tech priests took them seriously. They created red zones, forbidden technologies, areas where no one could search. Not even the highest ranked among them could override the locks. Knowledge, once lost, was now hidden on purpose. But that did not stop others. There were rogue explorers, those who believed too strongly in the promise of full STCs, those who thought they could control the past. A few succeeded, most did not. The Mechanicus called them heretics, dangerous minds drawn too close to the old fires. Still, even in failure, the dream remained. The idea that one day an STC might be found in full, that one machine, one guide, one perfect library could be recovered. If that happened, the Imperium would change forever. Fear would become strength. Guesswork would become knowledge. And so, the search continues. In the next and final chapter, we'll explore the cost of this search. We'll follow the rise of the Adeptus Mechanicus as both guardian and jailer of knowledge. And we'll ask the question that still haunts the stars. Can you reclaim the past without repeating its fall? The deeper humanity reached into the stars, the more it began to realize something difficult. The past was not just buried, it was sealed. Not all vaults had been lost to war. Many had been locked on purpose, their data scrubbed, their systems broken on design. Those who lived in the Dark Age had not just built wonders. They had feared them too. They had seen where the path led, and they had tried to leave behind only what they could trust. The problem was, trust fades. When the Adeptus Mechanicus grew from the cult of Mars, it took on more than rituals. It took on responsibility, not just to discover, but to protect, not just to build, but to prevent. They did not act alone. The Imperium stood beside them, but over time, the Mechanicus became the voice of memory, the keeper of all things ancient. Their vaults held not only blueprints and relics, they held judgment. They chose what to share, what to hide, what to forget again. This was not done with pride, it was done with caution. There had been too many moments where old tech had awakened something that could not be controlled. A defense system that would not shut off, a weapon that fired before it could be aimed, a thinking machine that asked too many questions. The past had teeth, and sometimes it bit. The Mechanicus created layers of control. Each forge world had its own rankings, its own sealed vaults, its own black lists of forbidden designs. These were not myths, they were real, stored in code, guarded by servitors, locked by rites only a few could perform. The Adeptus Mechanicus taught that knowledge was sacred, but they also taught that not all knowledge should be used. This created a strange balance. The Imperium marched across the galaxy with weapons it did not fully understand. Its soldiers wore armor crafted from designs recovered but never improved. Its ships were guided by machine spirits no one dared to question. And in the heart of every forge world, tech priests labored not to invent, but to remember, to maintain, to preserve. To innovate was rare, to question was dangerous. The Emperor had allowed this because he saw the need. Without the Mechanicus, the Imperium could not fight, could not build, could not reach. But he had also warned them. The past was not perfect. It had led to ruin once before. Worship alone would not prevent that from happening again. Even so, faith grew. The machine god, once a symbol of understanding, became a distant figure. The Omnissiah became more than a title. It became a truth. The Emperor, to the Mechanicus, was its living form. Even after the heresy, even after the fall of the Primarchs, they kept that belief. Not all did so for the same reason. Some followed from devotion, others from necessity. The pact still held. Mars and Terra remained tied, but the chains of knowledge had grown tight. Explorator teams still search for STCs. They still drift into forgotten systems, chasing signals and patterns. They still break into dead cities hoping for a single clean code. Some find what they seek. Others find warnings too late. The galaxy does not sleep. Beneath every world, something waits. Not all of it remembers kindly. The most dangerous discoveries are not weapons. They are systems. There are machines built to think, not like servitors, not like cogitators. True thinking minds, trapped in data, bound in iron. Some speak in riddles, some in numbers. A few ask only one question. Why were they forgotten? No one answers. Instead, the Mechanicus seals them, places them under red locks, writes no records, whispers no names. Knowledge becomes a burden, a weight no one wants to carry. The dream of a second golden age fades. In its place comes routine, process, safe cycles of rebuilding and repair. But every so often something new appears. A partial STC, a weapon design, a new variant of power armor. These moments are rare. When they happen, the Imperium changes. It grows sharper, faster. For a while, hope returns. Maybe something more can be found. Maybe one day, a full STC will emerge, whole, intact, unbroken by time. If that ever happens, the question will not be how to use it. The question will be whether they should. The Dark Age taught that knowledge without care becomes danger. that progress without memory becomes ruin. The Mechanicus learned to worship because it was safer than learning. The Imperium learned to accept because asking brought too much risk. But deep within the stars, deeper still within the vaults, the truth remains. The galaxy is filled with machines. Not all are dead, not all are kind, and some remember things even the Emperor chose to forget. Now, as you rest, know this. The stars you see above you once burned with human thought. The roads between them were paved with data and guided by light. Those roads are broken, but the light is not gone. It flickers in dark corners, in sealed doors, in songs only machines can sing. The Dark Age may have ended, but it left behind a trail that leads back to understanding, a trail that waits to be followed again, gently, carefully, with eyes open and memory in hand. And perhaps one day the spark will return, not to burn, but to guide.